What will be hot in workplace learning in 2026? What are your L&D challenges? And what are you doing now in L&D that you were not doing 12 months ago? These are some of the questions more than 3,500 L&D professionals answered in the 13th Annual Global Sentiment Survey. And we've got the results.
And the constant theme that comes up is being asked to do more with less. The fourth one is learning, engagement, and application. So people are wanting people to actually engage with what they create and also to then go off and apply it in the workplace. And finally, there's a lot of, I think, and underlying all of these, but it's a category in itself as well, is a fear, a sense of uncertainty about L&D's new role as it's perceived.
That's Donald Taylor, lead researcher and author of the Learning and Development Global Sentiment Survey. He joins DaVinci CEO Luke Kempsky and me to unpack this year's survey results and discuss how they impact your role in the industry. Next on Powered by Learning.
Powered by Learning is brought to you by DaVinci Interactive. DaVinci's approach to learning is grounded in 30 years of innovation and expertise. We use proven strategies and leading technology to develop solutions that empower learners to improve quality and boost performance. Learn more at davinci.com.
The 2026 Learning and Development Global Sentiment Survey results are out, and that means it's time to learn what's shaping the L&D landscape this year. Joining me now are DaVinci CEO Luke Kempsky and the lead researcher and author of the Learning and Development Global Sentiment Survey, Donald Taylor. Don, thank you for joining us again this year.
Great to be back.
Great to see you again, Don.
Don, start out by providing a brief overview of your background and then, of course, some background on the survey and how it's put together.
I've been involved in learning and technology all my adult working life, so that's a long time. And I've seen things grow and change over that time. Started off as a classroom instructor, and I've done everything since, from setting up and selling companies to being chairman of the board, running an institute. And now I focus on chairing and facilitating conferences and also research and writing to try to help the learning and development profession move to what I think is going to be an exciting but challenging future.
Yes, no doubt. I guess 2026 is lucky number 13 for this survey. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about the results. I guess let's start with the second question in the survey, which was, what do the responders say about what L&D leaders are seeing as some of their biggest challenges here in 2026?
What's really interesting about this question, Luke, is that we added it to the survey 5 years ago. And since then, the number of words people have used to respond has increased, and the percentage of people it shot up after AI came in and people found they had a lot of challenges, but it's gone up ever since. So this year, like in 2024, we had 95% of people who took the survey responding. And that's a total of 41,000 words that we've got describing the challenges. So that's a lot. It's about the same as a short book. And the challenges that they're describing are very different to the ones that we had when we first had this question in 2022, pre-AI. Then it was all about coming out of lockdown and pandemic. Now I can describe for you what the 5 key themes are that people are concerned about. Obviously, AI is one of them, adoption and use. So adoption and integrating it into work. Value remains a really high concern for people. And the other side of that is budget. People, and the constant theme that comes up is being asked to do more with less. The fourth one is learning, engagement, and application. So people are wanting people to actually engage with what they create and also to then go off and apply it in the workplace. And finally, there's a lot of, I think, and underlying all of these, but it's a category in itself as well, is a fear, a sense of uncertainty about L&D's new role as it's perceived.
Yeah, you mentioned fear. I guess in general, what would you say is what you feel from the sentiment of the L&D leader, the responder to the survey, about kind of the state of the practice of learning and development inside an organization and in the midst of all this change? Do you get a sense of how they're feeling these days?
Yeah, it would be very easy to say that everyone's running scared of AI. And if you look at some of the numbers, that would seem to indicate it. But there's a subtle twist here, which is that there's a new question this year. What are you doing new that you weren't doing 12 months ago? It's very interesting to see how people have changed over the course of a year. Actually, very often what they're saying they are tackling anew are also the stuff that they have as a challenge. And so I'm rather heartened by that. It strikes me that people are facing up to the challenges and are tackling them rather than running scared. So I think that there is a real concern, and value is a particular part of this. So the option showing value has risen for the last 2 years to an all-time high this year. It's just an all-time high, but it is an all-time high. And the reason when I talk to people about this, that they say they're concerned about showing value is they're concerned about their jobs and their budget and their team. I think that's reasonable, but if we're talking to people who are fully engaged in using L&D as part of the business, and this actually comes out in the survey, those people are much less afraid. Those people are much more challenged by being able to get the most out of AI and new technologies rather than look after their current position. Things are also a little bit, it's difficult to put an exact figure on it, but there appears to be a different flavour internationally. So I think people in the UK are more concerned about their jobs. I think in the US, people are more concerned about low quality learning content, for example. So I think there's a slight geographical bias too in people's sentiment.
Interesting, yeah. So when you talk about value, and I guess, pulling from the sentiment and the responses in the survey, where do the L&D leaders, how are they connecting the value to the businesses that they're working with, the leadership that they're providing?
They're doing what they should be doing. There are a number of responses where somebody talks about the challenge of providing value and at the same time is saying, what we're doing is ... and they're doing exactly the right things to tackle the issue of value. So we've got people who are doing things like engaging with stakeholders. Now, it sounds so trivial, but it's absolutely right. Here's one classic couplet. The challenge, somebody said, was the focus is on creating practical, measurable learning that impacts performance, not just participation. So that's this participant's words. That's the challenge, and the action they're taking. I now take more ownership of projects and focus on improving learning outcomes, not just delivering sessions. I love the idea of taking ownership, and I think that's exactly the right thing to be doing. We can talk all we want about strategy and big picture, but ultimately, what's going to make sense in this new world where things are a bit different is taking ownership, taking action, and doing things in the right way that will support an active, effective learning department.
Yes, I think the other challenge might be too aligning, the ability to measure value in the investment in learning and development. And then also kind of taking all of the data that's generated both in, throughout the enterprise, but then also in the L&D function and making that connection.
Real problem there with data. You're 100% right. 2 reasons. Firstly, there's a lot of data in the learning department, which nobody else is really concerned about. And getting access to data outside the department is much more complicated than a lot of people think. And I always say, don't start with AI. Start with data, but don't start with data. Start with data plus relationships, because you don't get hold of the data unless you know who owns it. And in most organizations, people are pretty jealously guarding onto their data. They don't want you to see their sales numbers or whatever. You have to have a relationship with them before they'll give them up. And then, they'll let you have the data if they think it's going to help them.
How did data rank this year in the survey?
We don't have a separate thing for data, unfortunately, though it is interesting that at the top of the table, of course, is artificial intelligence. And then after that, we've got reskilling, upskilling, which relies on data. Personalization needs data. Skills-based talent management needs data. So these things at the top of the table are all about data. What's interesting is that falling down the table tends to be the individual tools, such as coaching and mentoring and micro-learning. Those things are dropping down. I would say this, though. Next year, I'm going to be taking AI off the list. It makes no sense to have it there. It's more like saying, what do you prefer in your kitchen? What's most important, the microwave, the dishwasher, or electricity? And, it's not a sensible choice. So I'm going to take AI off, and I'm going to also strip some of the other ones out. The metaverse has been languishing at the bottom of the table for 3 years now. Nobody loves it. So there'll be a few changes on the list. And what I might be doing is adding a few options that enable us to think about, as you're saying, the bigger picture. Data maybe would be one of those, or a wording around it suggests that people are engaged with that. Another one would be not performance support, which is one side of things, but simulation, because I think simulation is a growing area in learning and development that a lot of people are interested in, and I think it's going to take off. So that's what I try to do, is pick some winners and see which ones take off in people's imagination.
Yeah, I think that's with simulation, the tools that AI are providing us allow, much more cost-effective development of simulations.
Absolutely. And some of the things that people show me, because I get hit up quite a lot by people wanting to show me stuff, and you look at this stuff and you think, firstly, I didn't really think that was possible. And secondly, this is insane, because if this takes off, then, and there's no reason why it wouldn't do, then it transforms what we're doing. And I think it's this transformation of AI, a learning and development through AI, which is extraordinary. Somebody was telling me the other day that about 10 years ago, they come back into an L&D role, having been out of it for 10 years, and they were able to fit right back in. I can't imagine anybody leaving L&D now and coming back in 5 years and knowing which way is up. It's just going to be a different ballgame.
When you think about the technology and the sentiment about the technology and how it's emerging, what do you see in terms of where the L&D leaders are the most enthusiastic about where it's going?
Well, I think obviously people are enthusiastic about the ability to create content faster, but I think people are smart about that as well. They're not just focusing on that. They're focusing on some of the other things which are interesting extensions of that, particularly around skills. People are interested in being able to get an idea of the skills of an organization. I would say also that there's a certain amount of wariness about a couple of things. Firstly, the environmental and security issues around using AI. And I think security issues are fairly high on people's list. They're concerned about protecting their own employees and organizational data. I think people are also concerned about something else as well. The word human didn't crop up in those challenges at all in 2022, 2023. But in 2024, 5 and 6, it's increased, and it occurred more than 60 times this year. What's going on? Well, some of those phrases are like, well, we think that there's a risk of taking the human out of learning. I think there's a bit more than that going on. For that word to be used so much, I think it's referring to more of an identification with learning that people have. They feel that we're doing this and we're bringing ourselves, our humanity, to this, and we're concerned about being cut out from it by machines. So I think there's something fundamental going on there as well. So we're going to keep track of that next year and see. Well, I'll have a human count, a humanometer that will tell us how many times we are being mentioned as humans in the word count.
So with this 13th edition of the survey, any surprises for you, Don? Like anything that stood out that you said, oh, I didn't expect that?
There was a relief rather than a surprise that AI finally stopped going up. I wouldn't say any one thing surprised me, but there were a number of results which together gave me pause for thought. So there's a series of countries, 5 of them, where their voting for at least 5 years, probably 10, had been predictable. The Netherlands was always the country that supported performance support the most. Ireland was the lead country for coaching and mentoring, and so on. In 2024, all of these countries took a hit on their favourite thing, whatever it was. And that's because all the votes got sucked up by AI. The following year, 2025, everybody bounced back. It was a recovery. It was almost like, not across the board, but if a country had wanted a particular thing in the past, it wanted it again, and it went back to voting for it. That didn't continue this year. That's my shock. This is the sign for me that we're entering into a new area. In some cases, the voting continued. So the UK, I think, went up this year with showing value. The Netherlands was flat with performance support. Collaborative and social learning in Sweden, which was they were leading the world on this, took a complete head dive. This shows me that the old predictability of the past isn't there anymore. So it wasn't one single thing by itself, but a collection of these things together, showing me that AI makes things different. We're entering a new world. We don't know what all the rules are. We can't use the past as a guide. We have to work out how we make sense of this new terrain and map it out for ourselves as we go.
That's so interesting. So culture matters. It's just less predictable now. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Do you notice a difference in terms of the relevance and the, I guess, the optimism about learning and development function in the different countries, in the different cultures? It feels more connected to an enterprise versus it being, on the downslide.
I did have a question which I tried once. It was 5 years ago, I think. What's your level of optimism? Do you feel more or less optimistic than last year? And I wish I'd kept that in, because that would have been a great, simple yes-no barometer to see where we were. I don't have any way really of tracking how people are feeling about things generally, and I wish I did. I might go back. Of course, the great thing about AI is we've got tremendous power to look at qualitative data now, and so I might go back and ask that question of the data, and if I get anything, I'll come back and tell you.
That sounds good. I imagine budgets are issues across all the cultures for sure, and that certainly leads to much more emphasis on demonstrating value and making sure that the L&D leaders are making the case for how critical the L&D function is in this era of lots of change and AI and cultural change and political change and economic change, all of those things hitting at one time.
It's a good point. We talk about AI as if it was everything, but it's not the only thing. And one thing you do get from this survey is the real sense of individual circumstances and individual places affecting people. I mean, a number of places in the world are at war. That gets referenced in the survey. Definitely the economic situation in the UK doesn't help people here. In the US, I think people are feeling a bit better, but there's a certain uncertainty as well. I think there's a feeling in the US that the economic situation might be about to turn. In Southeast Asia, there's more of a sense that, well, we can get things done, but we haven't got the budgets in the first place. And very often from there's a sense that the hierarchical arrangements in the workplace are hampering innovation. So you're absolutely right that the culture and what happens in a particular place will affect, and the local circumstances will affect what's going on. And it's also worth bearing in mind that cultures do change, because I've noticed that in both Brazil and Sweden, which both have supported collaborative and social learning very strongly in the past, there's two countries obviously very far apart. There's a shift towards more individualism. And if you talk to people in those countries, they're both talking about how there's a move away from collectivism towards individualism in quite different ways. I mean, Geert Hofstede, the famous, I guess you'd call him an anthropologist or a statistician, produced these different dimensions of culture, collectivism and individualism being one of the dimensions. And Brazil is famously on one end of it, but it seems to be shifting more towards an individualistic view of life. And that's independent of anything else that might be going on in learning and development. It's just a cultural shift. So circumstances do, I wouldn't say dictate, circumstances do influence what goes on, but nothing is set. Things do change over time, and that's one change we've definitely seen.
For sure. I know I asked this to you last year about the evolving role of the L&D leader and kind of what skills and what they should be doing to be prepared for the evolution of their roles. And I know that's not specifically in the survey, but you can detect some of those things from the results.
For sure. And this is one of those things where people won't necessarily say it, but you can see what people are and are not doing. And you can say to yourself from the sidelines, oh, for goodness sake, why are you doing that? You should be doing this. And one of the things that stands out is that the people who are more confident about taking, by the way, I'm not sure if this is causal or correlation, but the people who are more confident about taking steps forward and doing new things are the people who are better networked in their organization, and the people who can go elsewhere for advice and know that if something goes wrong, they've got high up people who've got their backs. Now, as I say, I don't know if that's causal or correlation. It might be that if you're good at implementing stuff, you naturally form these networks. It might be that forming those networks provides you with a safety net and input of data. But either way, I think that it's crucial for learning leaders to get out there in their organization and outside it and build networks, because that's what is going to provide you support when you need it most. And also, by the way, networks are a two-way street. You can't go into a network just to take. You have to provide support for other people as part of it.
Absolutely. I think that's really not maybe what people would have expected in terms of your interpretation of the data, but really, really smart. So really interesting. I think last year we pressed you on a prediction for this year.
This is Don's favorite part of the interview.
I was hoping the internet could go wrong or something at this stage.
Still might happen. But it sounds like, I think your prediction was that AI would go down, and I think you said that it went down a very tiny bit.
Tiny bit. So I got it right last year. The concern I have is that if we don't change, or the people who for whatever reason don't change as part of L&D will be left behind. And I think that's a firm choice people have to make. I'm not going to make that as a prediction because it's slightly negative, and also there's no way of even testing it. I would say, so my prediction for this year, 2026, so if you are kind enough to have me back next year, you can say, Don, last year you predicted. All right, so what I predicted was the rise of new ways of using AI to support learning beyond content production and provision. That sounds a bit vague, but it comes back to what we were talking about earlier, in particular simulation and practice. I think that's an area which is going to take off. I would love to say it's going to be implicit knowledge, but I'll save that for my prediction for 2027. I think that's something which will come down the line.
Yeah, I think the idea of content and course development becomes something very different and evolves into something very different.
100%. I think that the idea of a course will still exist, but it's going to be very different in the future, and it will have embedded in it reactive content, adaptability, and practice, all of which can be created on the fly for you.
Yeah, that's fun. That really is... that gets you excited as a content creator. It brings so many new possibilities. I know in your LinkedIn, it mentioned that you are now more involved with venture capital and startups, particularly in the L&D space these days. Do you see any intersections between some of these new L&D ventures and how they're developing, and what L&D leaders are saying about their challenges and opportunities?
There are at least two different types of startup. One is the one that's product-led, and somebody has an obsession with something and they go off and they produce it. And those ones, they can fail and succeed spectacularly, depending on whether the product finds a niche. The other ones where people are producing something, either a deep need they've seen themselves or a deep need that they've spotted elsewhere, are the ones which are more likely to succeed, even if they are dealing with something which is more short-term. And I've seen people do that with the simulation piece, produce simulation tools, which are great. My concern is always in that space that if you're doing it, somebody else is almost certainly doing it. So don't persuade yourself that you've created something unique. I almost never see anything that's completely unique. I always ask the people a handful of tough questions. One question is, what problem are you solving? Next question is, does your client know they have that problem? And the third question is, will they pay enough to fix the problem? And too often, the product-led people who are very inspired by the technology haven't thought enough about the problem they're solving, really, and whether people will pay for it. And I think that tends to sort out the goats from the sheep, or whatever the phrase is. But that's where things are made or broken, is whether they're really solving a problem.
Yes, that makes perfect sense and resonates with me as an entrepreneur. And some things that I should have thought about a little deeper before venturing in some things.
Passion helps too, though. That overcomes a lot of obstacles.
Don, just some final thoughts to wrap things up. As L&D professionals are looking at the survey, how do you hope that they'll use it, and what do you want them to take away from it?
That's a really good question. And my answer is that I try not to provide too much direction. I try to provide data and insight, but I also have questions on a lot of pages. And I know that a lot of people sit down with their team, and this is what I'd suggest doing. Sit down with your team, see, do you agree with it? Don't you agree with it? How would you answer those questions? What comes to your mind when you look at those charts? Stimulate a conversation. It's a bit like you go to a conference and you hear somebody talk and you have a cup of tea with somebody afterwards in the corridor and you have a good chat about something. Well, this is the same sort of stimulus that you can have with your team. I've been told that very often this provides a useful way of people getting together and sparking conversations which they otherwise wouldn't necessarily have had. And maybe it starts with the report and goes elsewhere. That's fine. Use it as a conversation starter and commit to challenging each other politely in a civil way about stuff, because we're in tough times. or we could be in tough times, and it's important to be honest and to work together to fix them.
I think one other tip we could take is that in the U.S., we all need to chat over tea a little bit more. I think that would have a calming effect on us all. Don Taylor, thank you so much for joining us. And check your calendar. We'd love to have you on next February to talk about next year's survey.
I'll make sure I get it booked in. Thanks so much for having me.
Great to see you again. Thank you, Don.
My thanks to DaVinci's CEO, Luke Kempsky, and our guest, Donald Taylor. Don, we'll see you next year to talk about the 2027 report. If you have an idea for a topic or guest, please reach out to us at poweredbylearning@davinci.com. And don't forget to subscribe to Powered by Learning wherever you get your podcasts.